Today, we explore the case of a young girl who vanished during a routine walk under mysterious circumstances. What followed stunned everyone, filled with unexpected twists and chilling revelations. This incident went on to become one of the most baffling cases in American history. Ultimately, however, detectives were able to uncover the truth. Christy Lynn Mullins was born on August 28, 1960, in Columbus, Ohio. She grew up as one of 5 children in a large family, residing in a quiet neighborhood far from the city's commotion. In the summer of 1975, at age 14, Christy spent much of her time with friends and her sisters, enjoying the carefree days of adolescence. Their favorite hangout was the pool at a nearby residential complex, especially during the sweltering summer days. Occasionally, Christy also took on babysitting jobs for families she knew. On August 22nd, one of them asked her to watch their child until late in the evening. The following day, Christy woke around noon, contemplating how to spend her birthday, which was just 5 days away. She was eagerly looking forward to it, making the time feel like it was dragging. That day turned out to be particularly hot, with temperatures climbing to 93 degrees. Christy quickly decided that the pool would be the perfect place to cool off and enjoy herself. She brought along her younger sister, Kim, and together they headed to the residential complex. Kim dove straight into the pool, while Christy chose to relax on a deck chair. Shortly after, a friend came over, and after a brief conversation, Christy left with her. Kim was taken aback that her sister had left without a word, but she decided to stay behind at the pool. Later, when Kim eventually went home, Christy was nowhere to be found. As hours passed without any sign of Christy, Kim grew increasingly worried. She began searching the streets and soon encountered a neighbor, who mentioned that the police had discovered a girl's body a few miles away about an hour earlier, though they hadn't been able to identify her. Alarmed, Kim ran home to inform her parents, who immediately contacted the authorities to report their missing daughter. The family was instructed to go to the morgue, where officers revealed the body of the deceased girl. Initially, Christy's parents couldn't be certain it was her due to the extensive bruising on her face. But soon, her mother noticed a birthmark on the girl's leg and confirmed it was Christy. Once her identity was verified, the police explained to the stunned family the events leading up to her death. Earlier that day, around 2:30 p.m., a man had called 911 to report discovering a human body in the wooded area behind a shopping center. He had been there with his wife and son, who had wanted to pick up a toy for their daughter. Before entering the shopping center, however, their son had asked to take a short walk in the wooded area behind the building. There was a popular trail through the woods that led down to the river, and because the scenery was so beautiful, many people went there simply to enjoy a walk. His parents agreed, and together they followed the path deeper into the forest. On their way back, the family spotted something unusual just a few yards away from the trail. When they went closer, they saw a man crouched over someone, striking them repeatedly with a wooden object. As soon as the man noticed them, he stood up and ran off. The father rushed to the spot and found a young girl lying on the ground, covered in blood. His wife, who was training in medicine, attempted to check for a pulse but found none. The man quickly ran to a nearby shopping center and used a store phone to alert the police. Both he and his wife later gave investigators a description of the attacker. He was described as a tall, slim young man, about 20 years old, with long dark hair that reached his shoulders. He wore nothing but denim shorts and boots. Using this description, police produced a sketch of the suspect and circulated it among patrol units. The crime scene itself offered little to go on. Officers did recover the wooden object used in the attack, but nothing that could help identify the killer. The victim's hands had been bound with a telephone cord, and her bikini top had been pulled down. Her t-shirt and shoes were discovered nearby. However, forensic testing revealed no signs of sexual assault. Investigators believed the attacker might have intended to assault her, but was interrupted or frightened away before carrying it out. Even without solid leads, investigators quickly figured out where to direct their attention. Christy's younger sister mentioned that she had left the pool with her friend and a girl named Carol, so police went to speak with her. Carol explained that earlier that day, she had received a strange phone call at home. The caller introduced himself as a DJ from a local radio station and claimed there would be a cheerleading competition in town, with free state fair tickets as the prize. According to Carol, the man told her the event would take place behind the shopping center at 1:45 p.m. He He instructed her to wait at the entrance of the forest trail, where someone would meet her and give further details. The police immediately found the story suspicious, and Carol's account included even more unusual details. She said she had originally planned to attend with her sister, but on the way they happened to meet Christy and her sister instead. After a short conversation, Carol invited Christy to join her, leaving their sisters behind as the two of them walked toward the shopping center. When they reached the entrance to the woods, they sat on a fence and waited, but nobody came. After a while, Carol told Christy she would run to the shopping center to check the time. She was gone only a few minutes, but when she came back, Christy had vanished. Carol lingered for a while, hoping someone would appear, but when no one did, she eventually went home. Investigators later confirmed that no cheerleading competition was scheduled anywhere in town. They suspected the mysterious caller might have been the killer trying to lure Carol into the woods, though it could just as easily have been a cruel prank unrelated to the crime. Unfortunately, the call could not be traced, leaving the caller's identity a mystery. Detectives also picked up on an inconsistency in Carol's account. She claimed she ran into Christy and her sister while walking to the shopping center, but Kim maintained that they had been at the pool when Carol approached them there. That wasn't the only odd detail. Later that evening, Christy's mother ran into Carol, who lived just a short distance from their house, and their conversation took a strange turn. Carol started apologizing, saying things were never meant to go so far. She told the woman that she had actually been the intended target and that two people were involved in Christy's murder. Stunned, Christy's mother pressed for more information, but Carol refused to elaborate and walked away. The mother immediately informed police, who questioned Carol again. This time, however, she denied ever making those statements and insisted that her original version of events was the truth. Later, Carol underwent another round of questioning, this time with a polygraph test. The examiner reported no signs of deception in her responses to the key questions. As a result, investigators turned their attention away from her and resumed the search for other leads. In the days that followed, word of the brutal crime spread quickly through the city, leaving residents shaken with fear. The situation grew even more alarming when police revealed their belief that the killer was likely a local resident. Knowing that the suspect was familiar with the trail behind the shopping center, detectives concentrated their efforts on finding him. Just 3 days after Christy's murder, their persistence paid off. At around 5 p.m., a patrol officer in downtown Columbus noticed a man who bore a striking resemblance to the composite sketch of Christy's attacker. He quickly alerted detectives, who rushed to the scene. The officers asked the man to accompany them to the station for some questions, and he agreed without resistance. His name was Jack Harmon, a 25-year-old, but almost immediately the police encountered a major challenge. Jack had a severe intellectual disability, with various tests placing his IQ at around 50. He was under the supervision of a specialized medical facility and lived in housing provided by a non-profit organization, where he also worked. Jack couldn't read or write and spoke with great difficulty. Still, detectives couldn't dismiss how closely he resembled the composite sketch. Questioning him proved extremely difficult, as Jack often gave only one-word answers, or no response at all. Detectives soon began questioning whether Jack was even fully capable of comprehending the questions being asked. The interrogation dragged on for 6 hours, but eventually, by breaking things down into very simple, concrete terms, they managed to get what they considered a confession. Jack explained that on the day of the murder, he had left his apartment and taken a bus to the shopping center to shop for a new pair of pants and a shirt. While walking through the parking lot, he spotted Christy sitting on the fence near the entrance to the wooded trail. He said he approached her, restrained her hands, and pulled her into the woods, where he assaulted her. When Christy tried to flee, Jack claimed he chased her down, grabbed a piece of wood from the ground, and struck her repeatedly on the head. Afterward, Jack said he ran to the main road in front of the shopping center and caught a bus. The following day, police brought him back to the forest, where he pointed out the exact location of the attack. He also described details that only the killer could have known, for example, that the wooden weapon had snapped in half when he struck Christy. Detectives later arranged a lineup that included Jack and asked the couple who had discovered Christy to identify the man they saw that day. Both immediately pointed to him. Jack was then charged with multiple crimes, including assault and murder. Although forensic specialists found no evidence of sexual assault, Jack admitted to it in his confession and prosecutors chose not to dismiss that charge. Prosecutors initially pushed for the death penalty, but Jack's attorney, with Jack's approval, negotiated a deal. Jack would plead guilty before the judge in exchange for a life sentence rather than execution. With thousands of people closely following the case, the proceedings moved quickly. On September 3rd, just 11 days after Christie's murder, Jack was sentenced to life in prison. Yet, doubts about his guilt soon began to spread. As more details about Jack's confession and personal background surfaced in the media, people started questioning whether he was truly capable of such a crime. Those who knew him expressed disbelief. They described Jack as passive, timid, and easily led, never aggressive. In fact, they said he would tell any lie if pressured firmly enough. For instance, at a charity center, Jack once took the blame for a broken boiler even though someone else was responsible. This raised further doubts about his confession. Jack could hardly speak, yet police claimed he had described the crime in precise detail. People who knew him suspected that investigators had simply supplied him with the information he repeated back. All they had to do was ask leading questions that contained details of the case. For example, did you hit the victim with a piece of wood? If Jack said yes, it could be presented as a confession. A woman involved in his care later explained that Jack was so suggestible that under threat, he would admit to anything. Just hearing that he might face the electric chair would have been enough to make him comply with whatever detectives demanded. But that wasn't the only concern. Supporters of Jack's innocence discovered that police had taken him to the crime scene at the very same time as the witnesses, the married couple who later picked him out in a lineup. This meant they had already seen Jack beforehand and knew he was a suspect. Although police insisted the two groups never crossed paths, few believed that claim. Other details further fueled doubts about Jack's guilt. Investigators were unable to track down the bus driver, or even a single passenger, who could confirm seeing Jack on the ride he claimed to have taken back to the city center. But perhaps the most compelling evidence came from several people at the charity organization where Jack both lived and worked. Witnesses from the charity center said they saw Jack around 1:30 p.m. If that were true, it would have been impossible for him to take a bus to the shopping center on the city's outskirts and commit the murder by 1:50 p.m. The bus ride alone would have taken at least 40 minutes, even if he had left immediately after being spotted. These facts led many to believe not only that Jack was innocent, but that his confession had been coerced by investigators. Even Christie's parents began doubting whether he was truly the killer. On September 9th, just 6 days after the sentencing, about 70 people gathered outside City Hall to demand a full investigation into the case. A public committee was soon formed with the mission of pursuing justice. Through their efforts, Jack obtained a new lawyer who quickly petitioned for a case review. Several months later, a judge threw out Jack's confession and ordered a retrial. This meant the prosecution now had to prove his guilt almost entirely from scratch, a task that seemed nearly impossible. While preparations for the new trial were underway, Christie's father, Norman Mills, launched his own investigation. From the very start, Norman distrusted the detectives, believing they weren't doing enough to catch his daughter's real killer. Refusing to rely solely on the police, he began searching for answers himself. Not long after the murder, he and some neighbors combed through the woods, where they discovered a pair of jean shorts and blood-stained men's underwear. These items were turned over to the police, who had initially missed them during their investigation. It was never confirmed whether the clothing found in the woods was connected to the crime, or even tested. Jack's new trial didn't begin until 1977, 2 years after Christie's death. The defense had two primary goals: to prove Jack's innocence and to point toward the real killer. In fact, they already had a strong candidate in mind, someone they believed was the most likely perpetrator. That person was Henry Newell, the very man who, along with his wife, had discovered Christie's body. At the time of the murder, Henry was 25 years old. By the time the retrial began, Jack's defense team had compiled a substantial list of reasons to suspect Henry's involvement, a list that continued to grow as the proceedings went on. One of the first red flags was Henry's criminal history. From his teenage years onward, Henry had been arrested numerous times for different crimes and had already served 3 prison terms. He even managed to escape custody twice before being recaptured. By the time of Jack's retrial, Henry was serving his 4th sentence, this time for setting his own house on fire in an attempt to collect insurance money. When Jack's lawyers reviewed the evidence in Christie's case, they found several troubling inconsistencies in Henry's testimony. Henry claimed that when he discovered Christie's body, he ran to her and picked up a blood-stained piece of wood, which he then tossed aside. He later explained the act by saying he had been in shock, but the behavior still seemed highly suspicious. Why would someone pick up the murder weapon and move it for no clear reason? Henry also stated that he thought Christie was still alive, so he removed his shirt and pressed it against her face. This raised further suspicion. Was Henry truly trying to stop Christie's bleeding, or was his shirt already bloodied during the murder and he needed an excuse for it? Jack's lawyers also tracked down a mall employee who saw Henry when he ran inside to call the police. She recalled that he wasn't wearing a shirt at the time, only jean shorts. Yet when officers arrived, he had changed into different pants. The same employee also noticed that Henry had a fresh bruise on his face, as though he'd recently been struck. When asked why she hadn't reported this earlier, she explained that no one had questioned her about it, though the police themselves should have spotted the bruise. Strangely, they never addressed it. Henry had also agreed to a polygraph test back then, but during the procedure he vomited on the machine, and the police never rescheduled another one. Another piece of testimony came from Henry's neighbor. He recalled speaking with Henry on the night of the murder and noticing numerous fresh scratches on his hands. The neighbor also remembered seeing a telephone cord in Henry's garage that closely resembled the one used to bind Christie's wrists. But his most disturbing statement was about something Henry had once told him. According to the neighbor, Henry claimed to know Carol, Christie's 14-year-old friend, and even said that the two of them had gone swimming naked together. Since Henry was 25 at the time, the story shocked everyone connected to the case. Although there was no way to verify whether this incident actually happened, it strongly suggested that Henry knew Carol, who herself was directly linked to the events surrounding the crime. Henry's wife, Pam, also testified during the trial. She repeated the same account they had given police on the very first day. Their son wanted to go for a walk, so they headed toward the mall, wandered into the woods, and discovered Christie's body. Pam added that before this, Henry had been at home the entire time, leaving only briefly to chase away neighborhood kids who were tossing firecrackers into their yard. Carol was also called to the stand. She testified that she had never met Henry and was questioned again about her strange remark to Christie's mother, that things were never meant to go so far. But once more, Carol denied ever making such a statement, claiming she didn't remember saying anything of the sort. Finally, Henry himself was brought into court from prison. He repeated his original story without changing a detail and firmly maintained that he had no involvement in the murder. One of the most pivotal moments of the trial came when the full recording of Jack's interrogation was played in court. Watching it, it became clear to nearly everyone that Jack had been pressured into agreeing with the detective's version of events. He spoke very little, seemed confused, and clearly didn't grasp what the police were trying to get him to say. Yet even this revelation wasn't the most dramatic turn of the trial. On the fifth day, an unexpected witness took the stand, someone neither the prosecution nor the defense had planned for. It was Bobby, Henry's stepson, and his testimony stunned the courtroom. He stated that while it was true Henry had gone outside that day to deal with kids throwing firecrackers, he hadn't been gone for just a few minutes, as Pam had insisted. Instead, Henry had been away for a much longer stretch of time. According to Bobby, Henry was gone for more than half an hour, and when he finally returned, his shirt and sandals were missing and fresh scratches marked his arms and face. Henry then called Pam into another room for a private conversation. When they came out, the couple told Bobby they were all going to the shopping center. Once there, however, his parents led him straight to the trail behind the mall. Bobby testified that he never asked to go for a walk, contrary to what his parents had claimed earlier. As they entered the woods, they quickly came across Henry's sandals, one of them torn, lying on the ground. Soon after, they discovered Christie's body. Bobby said his mother immediately warned him never to tell anyone what he had seen. He explained that he only chose to speak out years later after talking with his biological father, who urged him to finally do the right thing. Henry's grandmother also testified, recalling a disturbing incident. She explained that after attending Christie's farewell ceremony with Henry and Pam, she commented on what a terrible tragedy it was. To her surprise, Henry suddenly responded, "It will teach her to keep her mouth shut." Another witness, a close friend of Henry's, stated that Henry had once admitted to killing Christie. According to him, Henry insisted the act wasn't premeditated, but happened by accident. By the end of the trial, it was clear that Jack had no connection to the murder, and all charges against him were dismissed. The most shocking twist, however, was that despite the significant evidence pointing toward Henry, the prosecutor declared he had no plans to pursue charges against him. He also insisted that the original investigation had been handled as thoroughly as possible. Yet, at the same time, the prosecutor admitted that police had either overlooked or outright ignored a large amount of evidence and clues from the very beginning. His statement triggered widespread public outrage, which grew so intense that just 2 days later he was forced to reverse course and announce that Christie's case would be reopened. The problem, however, was significant. Investigators were still leaning heavily on the original findings, including the testimonies given by Henry and Pam. In other words, they continued to operate on the belief that the couple had discovered Christie's body in the woods with a long-haired, shirtless man standing over her. Because of this, detectives declared that their focus would remain on finding new suspects resembling Jack. Naturally, this approach led nowhere. The investigation dragged on for months before eventually going cold. Still determined to uncover the truth, Christie's father refused to give up. At one point, he even filed a civil lawsuit against Jack, but his reasons weren't as straightforward as they appeared. He didn't actually believe Jack was the murderer. Instead, the lawsuit would have given him access to the official case files, allowing him to gather all available information himself. Sadly, this effort also came to nothing. In 2006, Christie's father passed away from cancer, never having seen justice served. For years, the case remained stagnant, until 2013, when former attorney John Lawler took an interest in it. Determined to dig deeper, he began his own investigation, reaching out to everyone connected to the case in hopes of uncovering new leads. Christie's relatives gave him a box filled with all the notes and records her father had collected before his death. Lawler carefully reviewed everything and interviewed dozens of people. The more he uncovered, the clearer it became to him that Henry was the true culprit behind Christie's murder. During his inquiry, he discovered that Christie's friend Carol had been smoking marijuana at the time. Looking further into it, he learned that, like some other local teenagers, she may have been buying it from Henry. This detail created yet another connection between Henry and Carol, and possibly explained why Christie ended up in the forest that day. Lawler theorized that the story about meeting a DJ was fabricated, and in reality, Carol had arranged to meet Henry there to purchase drugs. Maybe Carol brought Christie along under a different excuse, perhaps repeating the story about the DJ and the cheerleading competition. But there's also a much darker theory, that Carol may have lured Christie there at Henry's request, and he intended to assault her. When Christie resisted, as suggested by the scratches and bruises found on his body, Henry killed her. Further digging into Henry's past revealed that by then he had committed even more crimes, including arson, domestic abuse, and assault. There was also another deeply suspicious incident tied to him, though he was never prosecuted for it: the death of his wife, Pam. In 1982, after filing for divorce, she was found dead just a month later in the same apartment she still shared with Henry. The official cause of Pam's death was listed as a sleeping pill overdose, with a note suggesting she had taken her own life. But her family never accepted this explanation, believing Henry had tampered with the medication. The most suspicious detail was that no pill bottle was ever found in the apartment, something Pam could not possibly have hidden or disposed of after ingesting such a large amount. In 2013, the same year attorney Osler revisited Christie's case, Henry himself died of cancer at age 63. Still, Osler pressed forward with his work, eventually publishing a book that compiled every piece of information available about the murder. The book's release reignited public interest, and Christie's family, along with supporters, began pushing for the investigation to be reopened. Several of Henry's relatives eventually contacted Oliver, admitting that their entire family had long believed Henry was the one who killed Christie, but had chosen to remain silent. One relative recalled that shortly before her 16th birthday, Henry gifted her a car and took her for a drive. During the ride, he asked her to pull over, then looked at her and confessed that he had murdered Christie. He described the crime in detail, leaving her stunned. At the time, she dismissed his words, assuming he was drunk and fabricating the story after heavy drinking. But years later, when she read Oliver's book, everything began to make sense. These revelations ultimately contributed to the reopening of Christie's murder case in May 2014. For months, detectives carefully re-examined all the evidence, re-interviewed numerous witnesses, and revisited old leads. In his confession to a relative, Henry had admitted to assaulting Christie. While medical experts at the time found no proof of this, advances in technology allowed investigators to retest Christie's clothing. They discovered traces of semen, but the sample was too small for DNA analysis. The investigation carried on until late 2015, when detectives held a press conference. 40 years after the murder, they publicly confirmed that they were certain Henry was responsible. But since he had already passed away, the case could not proceed to trial. It was officially declared solved, and the investigation was closed. Still, without Henry's direct confession, investigators could never be completely certain of every detail of what took place. Investigators developed a strong theory about what likely happened. When Henry left home that day, he probably went to the trail behind the shopping center. It's possible that Carol had arranged to meet him there to buy marijuana, though that part could never be proven. Once at the trail, Henry came across Christie alone and decided to attack her. He tied her hands with a phone cord and led her deeper into the woods, where she resisted. Christie fought back, scratching him and striking his face, but Henry likely knocked her down and killed her using a piece of wood he found nearby. Afterward, he returned home, told his wife what had happened, and together they came up with a plan to protect him from facing justice. Notably, Carol never revealed the truth, even after all these years. It's possible that Carol was involved to some degree, though it seems unlikely she'll ever come forward with the truth. At the press conference, police publicly apologized to Christie's family for the careless way the original investigation was handled. From the very beginning, there had been enough evidence to charge Henry with the crime, but the investigators either overlooked it or chose to disregard it.